In the 300s, the cave mouth went dark, though the desert sun still blazed. Inside, St. Anthony the Great jerked awake to stone-sharp impacts on his ribs and shoulders. Something unseen circled him, scraping rock, driving him backward, as if the air had grown teeth. In that same 4th century night, sand hissed against the entrance and then stopped abruptly, like a breath held. St. Anthony felt pressure pin his chest to the wall. A loose stone lifted and struck his brow. He tasted iron, and the silence tightened. St. Anthony forced his knees under him and reached for the rough cross carved into the cave wall. He did not bargain with the darkness. He began to pray, low and steady. The blows returned, quick, hunting his mouth, his hands, his breath. St. Anthony seized a fist-sized rock and swung toward the moving void. The stone met nothing, yet a shock climbed his arm. Another rock skittered toward him on its own. He snatched it and hurled it into the black. St. Anthony rose, staggering, and stepped forward instead of retreating. He kept praying, each phrase landing like a hammer on the unseen force. The air shuddered. The impacts faltered. A harsh, animal rasp slid through the cave, then broke apart. St. Anthony pressed his palm to the wall's cold stone and traced the cross again, anchoring himself. He lifted another rock, ready. The pressure filling the cave recoiled. Outside, sand began to move again. Soft, ordinary, unafraid. St. Anthony stood alone in the widening quiet. He listened for circling steps, but heard only his breathing and the distant wind. In the desert, monks later repeated this night, and Athanasius recorded it as witness, not ornament. At dawn, St. Anthony stepped out of the cave with bruised shoulders and a steady gaze. He did not chase the presence into the dunes. He gathered scattered stones, set them back, and walked deeper into the silence that remained. St. Anthony stacked stones at the cave mouth, sealing gaps against wind and wandering eyes. The moment the last rock settled, the air inside thickened. Dust lifted in a tight spiral, not from breeze. His lamp flame bent sideways, as if bowed by a will. St. Anthony stepped deeper, refusing to give ground. A pebble clicked behind him, then another, like teeth tapping. He turned, and 2 stones hopped toward his heel by themselves. He kicked them aside. They returned, faster, striking his ankle hard. St. Anthony dropped to one knee, not in collapse but in deliberate posture. He began to pray again, steady, each word placed like stone on stone. The unseen force answered with weight. His shoulders pinned, his throat tightened. His breath shortened, then steadied under prayer. St. Anthony's fingers found a sharp rock. He gripped it and swung through the darkness, not wildly, but with aim, toward where the pressure felt densest. The rock struck nothing. Yet a jolt answered, and the air rippled, as if bruised. St. Anthony rose in one sharp movement. Another stone flew from the floor and clipped his cheek. He did not curse. He turned his face toward the cave wall's cross and kept praying. The impacts began to miss by inches, then by handbreadths. St. Anthony had fled wealth years before to live here, where the desert taught silence and scripture. Now the silence felt occupied. A low scraping circled him, closer than footsteps. He seized another stone, ready to throw, and the sound recoiled. St. Anthony stepped forward again, forcing the contest into a narrow space. He threw the stone, then another, not to display strength, but to deny the assault its rhythm. The cave answered with sudden stillness. Even dust hung, waiting, as if suspended. St. Anthony's prayer did not grow louder. It grew firmer. The pressure shivered, then retreated by a finger's breadth, then more. A final stone rolled away from him, as if pushed back. He stood breathing, listening for the return that refused to come. St. Anthony did not wait. He stepped into the center of the cave where the pressure had pooled. He lifted his hands, still praying, and the floor answered with a shudder. Pebbles jumped, then froze, as if held by an unseen command. St. Anthony felt the final surge rush toward him, sudden and heavy. The air struck his chest. His breath stopped for a heartbeat. He did not step back. He stood unmoving, prayer steady, while the force pressed and failed to pass him. St. Anthony closed his eyes. The cave contracted around him, then split with a sharp crack. Stones rolled away from his feet. The pressure broke, not gradually, but at once. Sound vanished, leaving a vacuum where the assault had been. St. Anthony opened his eyes into stillness. No movement followed. No stone rose, no breath pressed the air. Only his own heartbeat returned, slow and present. The cave, moments ago hostile, stood emptied, as if cleared by an unseen hand. St. Anthony lowered his hands and knelt once more, not from weakness, but release. He touched the stone floor, steady now. The night outside resumed its ordinary sounds. The desert had not changed. What entered the cave had gone. St. Anthony rose and gathered the scattered rocks, placing each where it belonged. He did not inspect wounds or count blows. He finished the prayer that had carried him through. The cave remained open, empty, obedient to silence. St. Anthony stepped outside as the first light thinned the dark. Bruises marked his body. Nothing followed him. He turned once toward the cave, then walked into the desert, where prayer and solitude had first taught him to stand.